everyone's back here, so I think we can, it's just about 1 minute for the lunch breaks. It's about to end, but I think we can already get started. And so our first part of the program after the lunch break is the main lessons learned from ENISA's exercise in June, Cyber Europe 2024. And on that, I have the honor to present Konstantinos Molinos, information security expert from ENISA, and also one of the co-organizers of today's event as well, I might add. I'll turn it over to Kostas. It's yours.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much. I will create a club, funds. So I'm Konstantinos Molinos. Some of you might already know me. I work for ENISA. I'm responsible for the energy cybersecurity related projects from the ENISA side, as well as I'm one of the key liaison with the NIS cooperation group at ENISA, and I work for the implementation of the NIS directive, including the energy sector as well. What we will present today is the results of I would say a very high level presentation of findings from the Cyber Europe 2024. Question to all of you, who participated in Cyber Europe 2024? Few hands, around 10 people. So, in general, Cyber Europe is a product of ENISA, which has a long history. The main purpose of this product is, first of all, to make the participants test their own activities, their own skills, their own capabilities internally at their organizations. And also to test at the European level the collaboration in a case of a crisis in the context of two well-established networks, the CSET network and the European Cyclone group, which is responsible for crisis management at European level. The key objectives of each Cyber Europe exercise are the following. First, to test, as I said, the capabilities internally for each organization. It's the concept of improvement based on the lessons learned from each exercise. These lessons learned become the feedback to the next series of exercise, so that we continue improving the quality of the Cyber Europe exercise, to build trust among the different stakeholders, mostly sectorial level, and last but not least, to be used as a kind of hands-on training. Participating in an exercise is equal to a kind of very nice training. As I said, we started in 2010, and this year, in the 2024, it was the last exercise that we organized. The reason that we will not, at the moment, present more information is the fact that it takes some time to summarize the results of the exercise, first, and second, you will see later how these exercises are organized, and ENISA is not the only one who takes decisions concerning the results and what will be published concerning Cyber Europe. Normally, we test every time one sector, and some sectors that are connected with the primary sector under scope. And this year, the sector which was under scope was energy. And I'm saying this because it's not ENISA that decides which sector will be under scope every year. There is a collection of representatives from the member states who take collective decisions, and they propose which sector they consider most critical each time in order to be exercised. And this time, the sector which was, according to the opinion of the member states, was the energy sector. More specifically, the two sectors that were tested and exercised were in scope, were the electricity subsector, primarily, together with gas sector, and more specifically, gas storage. In the electricity sector, where the focus was on transmission system operators and distribution system operators. And we also included as subsectors which support the energy sector, the digital infrastructures, because many energy providers, they collaborate with cloud providers, and the public administration with a focus on national regulatory authorities. You see the dates. It was 19 and 20 June 2024, and the steering of the whole exercise was performed from Athens at the ENISA headquarters. The main scenario of Cyber Europe was a set of sub-scenarios with connotations, with connections with well-known cyber incidents in the energy sector. You see DDoS attacks, you see ransomware attacks to a gas company, very much close to the pipeline in the States incident. And we had some injects with a connection with the law enforcement. So all these scenarios were put together under a platform and were executed from the participants during these 2 days. You see here that 5,000 participants were counted in the registers of ENISA. So from all different perspectives and sides of the energy sector, we had 30 countries, all the 27 member states, 2 EFTA countries, and United Kingdom also participated in the exercise. We had 4 European institutions, CERT-EU, Europol. As I said, we tested some scenarios with law enforcement implications, the ENISA, the Operational Collaboration Unit, and ACER. And we had also ENISA and E.DSO entity with us, and the CSERT network and Cyclone. Here we see how the exercise was governed. On the left-hand side, you see the teams that were established at the ENISA premises. ENISA had the control of the management or the whole exercise, and in a different room, there were the planners, the representatives of the member states. So we had 27 people, or 30 people, because as I said, we had the 27 member states plus 3 countries. We had 1 national representative, planner, for each country. And this planner was responsible to communicate with the local planner at the member state, at the national level, who was responsible for organizing internally at each member state the participants, the players. The injections and the events were fed to the players through a platform that ENISA runs, and it is available through the cloud. So the participants were made aware of the different scenarios and the different code that they had to execute or play with during these 2 days via this platform. What are the key insights that we can share at the moment to this audience? And of course, as you will see, we will share with you and the whole community more details in the coming weeks. First of all, we don't have to worry about the knowledge of the energy companies concerning on how to handle cyber attacks. The participants knew how to do that. They responded to the events in a sufficient way. However, we have noticed some other things which we will see in the coming slide, which were, I would say, less effective than it was expected. The participants demonstrated readiness in the sense that they followed the mechanisms, the internal mechanisms and procedures concerning the incident reporting and business continuity. There was a player satisfaction. The satisfaction of the players for the Cyber Europe 2024 was high, and they found that the exercise was a nice tool to identify gaps and a leverage for improvement. Some key policy observations. We found that the incident reporting was sufficiently addressed with the national CSIRT at the national level. However, this was not exactly the same case when it comes to cross-border incidents, and in that case, there was a kind of lack of information from the CSIRTs, the national CSIRTs, whether an incident is cross-border or not. Sometimes some CSIRTs seemed to communicate this information to the other CSIRTs so that the other CSIRTs be prepared. Sometimes they didn't. So the procedure was not clear and was not the same for all different member states. There is a need for regional approach, which means that despite the fact that the CSIRTs know very well the IT world, the IT environment, they need to collaborate vertically at the national level with the people who know the energy sector, the details, the engineers, in other words, the OT people. And this is something that was proven during the communication in the exercise. And this is more or less, perhaps it was an issue of the exercise, the different departments that were invited to participate within each organization to the Cyber Europe exercise. The coordination with the EU Cyclone, the crisis management mechanism, was somehow not very clear, and the reference to the network code was not there, in the sense that in the network code there are some provisions which allow the crisis management at the regional level, but no one of the Cyclone member mentioned this as a possible solution to the problems when it comes to the cross-border incidents. So in a nutshell, we would say that at business level, things seem to work well. The same stands true for the collaboration and incident reporting at the national level. However, we see that a lot of improvement is necessary when it comes to the reporting among different member states and the crisis management and the coordination with the coming legislation, where perhaps most of the participants in the EU cyclone, they were not aware, or they didn't mention at least. And I will close this presentation, but with what we can expect in the near future. As I said, the full publicly available report will be soon available to the ENISA website. We have to keep note that in the white version, white for distribution, I follow the TLP, the TLP, how to say, color. The white version will be available at the ENISA website, while the amber one will be for the participants and so on and so forth. The results that will be presented to the public are not the only results. I mean, ENISA is publishing the results from a European perspective. Each member state might have created a national, so to speak, report with the findings that are identified at a national level. This is under the discretion of the member state if they will announce it or not. Perhaps they will share it only with their national players. So this is for you just to understand that what you will see as after cyber exercise report is not that it covers the whole picture of the exercise. There are pieces that perhaps are not shareable with the rest. This is something you should keep in mind. And there are some results concerning, for example, the assessment of the planners, which will not, it's not necessary to be published for the public, but it makes sense for the participants, for the planners, to take it into consideration for the next cyber exercise. So the lessons learned, as we said, will feed the next series of Cyber Europe. The good thing that I have to announce is that already 2 member states have expressed an interest to replay this exercise for the energy sector, which means that despite the fact that we played this exercise, they would like to see a similar exercise, either the next or the next after, in 2028, a similar exercise in Cyber Europe. I think this is a very good fit with the network code, where ENISA, together with ENSOE and E.DSO entity, have to collaborate in order to organize cyber exercises, both at national as well at regional as well as European level. So I close with this remark my presentation, and I invite you to check the ENISA website when the report will be available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos. I invite you to take a seat as you're in the next panel, and we'll go right to our next panel. Are we prepared? Closing the skills gap. And for that panel, I'd like to introduce the discussion leader, Aurelio Blanquet, who is also one of the co-organizers of today's event. And Aurelio is Secretary General of the European Energy Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Aurelio, over to you.
Thank you, Charles. Good afternoon to everyone. So, on behalf of TAM, I will start inviting to the stage my colleagues to the panel. I will start with, Konstantinos is already here. Thank you, Konstantinos. And we'll ask or invite José Messeguer to join us. José is from Schneider Electric and TED Europe. Secondly, Nuno Medeiros from Arredes. Willem Strabing from ESMIG. I saw him during the lunch. Thank you, Willem. Torben from Senelec. Thank you. Laurent Schmidt from Decibel. And last but not least, Yuzu Yarviniemi. I hope my pronunciation is not so bad. And from DG Connect, representing the Commission. And I would like to invite Yuzu to deliver an opening note addressing the biggest cybersecurity risks for the European electricity system, as well as how does he see the current legislation addressing the cyber supply chain risks. So, Yuzo, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As was introduced, I'm Juuso Järviniemi. I'm a policy officer at the European Commission in the Cybersecurity and Digital Privacy Policy Unit at DG Connect. So you have earlier met Felipe this morning, who works at DG Energy, and we at Connect, we have the overall cybersecurity framework for different sectors in our portfolio. So indeed, I'm going to speak about the regulatory framework and then also about the risks and threat landscape for this sector. Now, I'm stating the obvious when I'm mentioning that electricity, it's an absolutely crucial sector for our societies and for our daily lives. We wouldn't have cyber without electricity, and many of the other critical sectors that we are working with, they all depend on a secure supply of electricity. So that's why I think this is a sector that we have to pay particular attention to at the Commission. And indeed, the EU regulatory framework, it does exactly that. As you know, the NIS1 directive already included electricity in its scope, and it's going to be the same also in the NIS2 directive with updated provisions also on the scope. But then secondly, there is the network code, which has been mentioned several times today already, which complements this framework and specifically addresses cross-border electricity flows. A third piece of regulation that I think has been mentioned today as well is the Cyber Resilience Act. This is in its final stages coming towards adoption. And I think this is important from a supply chain perspective because when you have secure digital products in the internal markets, it helps all the providers in the ecosystem to ensure that they have secure supply chains. But I will now come back to NIS2 for a moment. NIS2 is also the main file that I'm personally working on. And supply chain security is one of the big developments of NIS2 directive compared to the first NIS directive. So now in NIS2 directive, one of the security requirements that we place on all of the entities in scope of NIS2 is supply chain security. The mention itself in the directive, it is simply one line saying supply chain security, including elements of direct suppliers to the entity. But NIS2 is a directive, and this means that member states are currently transposing the NIS2 into their national legislative frameworks. This also offers an opportunity for member states to further specify the meaning of these provisions. And of course, at the member state level, there also are existing frameworks that member states may use to implement these provisions of the NIS2 directive. The network code also pays special attention to supply chain security. The cybersecurity risk assessment methodologies that are to be developed under the network codes give consideration to various specific types of supply chain threats. For example, the unavailability of certain ICT products or services or processes, or the introduction of weaknesses or backdoors into these products. Or another example is the leakage of sensitive information through the supply chain. So this is one example of how the network code takes care for supply chain security. But then a second point, which is even more directly to the point, is the set of minimum and advanced controls in the supply chain, which are to be developed under the network codes. So these minimum and advanced controls, which will apply to the critical and important entities under the network codes, they will provide for a comprehensive European-wide framework for supply chain security for these entities in scope of the network codes. Just to give a bit more insight into that, so among the different elements of these minimum and advanced supply chain controls, there will, for example, be a requirement to take into account the results of relevant coordinated supply chain security risk assessments from the NIS2 directive, which is actually, again, an illustration of the interplay between the network codes and the NIS2 directive. So when you're designing your supply chain measures under the network code, then of course it's logical that you also take into account the work that has been done under the NIS2 directive. I will mention a bit more about these coordinated risk assessments under NIS2, because this is, again, another novel invention of the NIS2 directive. It ensures that we have a clear legal basis at the European level to produce these coordinated supply chain risk assessments. You might know from other sectors, for example, for 5G, similar risk assessments have already been done, and this was kind of the basis for the 5G toolbox. And now we have a legal basis and the possibility to perform this kind of assessments for other sectors that are identified. So this also makes sure that we have a common format for this kind of assessments. Already, now NIS2 is not yet, the transposition is not yet done, but already there has been work in this regard, and specifically focusing on the electricity sector. This July, the NIS Cooperation Group published a risk evaluation report, which also included risk scenarios, and it focused precisely on the telecommunications and on the electricity sectors. It's a public report, which is available from the Commission website, and it's a good source of insights into different threats that the sector is facing, and also scenarios that might transpire. So, for example, this report it highlights insider threats as one potential threat to a sector. There's also an emphasis on malware and ransomware attacks. And as a third threat, it highlights the threat of espionage. So to me, I think this multitude of different threats that are identified in this report, it also showcases the need to have this full range of cybersecurity risk management measures. So we speak about supply chain security, but for example, insider threats, that speaks to another provision from NIS2, which is human resources security. Under NIS2, there's also requirements to consider access controls, for example. So it shows that all of these security controls, they will of course have to work together to ensure cybersecurity in the entities. From this July report that I mentioned, another element is kind of characterization of the electricity sector. So it mentions the interconnectedness between countries in this sector. I think this interconnectedness, cross-border connectedness, is also a logic which is at the heart of the network code. So I think this is again something that the EU framework has recognized. And another characteristic is that the July report mentions is the reliance on operational technologies, which again is directly relevant to supply chain security and also to other areas addressed by the NIS2 measures, for example, asset management. So in conclusion, what this shows to me is that the EU legislative framework on cybersecurity, it is quite versatile. It's able to address the challenges of different sectors, and in this case, also the electricity sector. And that brings me towards my conclusion. So I have spoken about the robust framework that we have in place, especially with NIS2, with the network codes, but also with the Cyber Resilience Act that is soon to be adopted. All of this framework, it recognizes supply chain threats. It provides tools for addressing these threats. And that's why I think that at this moment, as we are transitioning to NIS2 in concrete, as we are transitioning into the network code in concrete, it's important that we implement this framework in the best way possible to guarantee a high level of cybersecurity. So that's it for the opening remarks. I'm looking forward to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you, E.DSO. Please take your seat. And now let's start with the panel. We have the privilege to have 7 panelists and only 2 hours and a half for the panel. So I will try to manage my time as well as possible. I will try not to be perfect, but I will try to make this panel be good as we had this morning. So I will start by asking each member of the panel to present himself a little bit deeper than I did. So I will ask you 1 minute to each one of you to present yourselves and say what are your what issues that you are dealing in your companies today. So I can start maybe with Laurent in the opposite side of the panel.
Yes, good morning to everyone. So I'm Laurent Schmidt. I'm in charge of a startup called Decibel. We are aiming for providing equipment in homes for connecting solar bidirectional charging of car, storage behind the meter into flexibility aggregators. And so, of course, we are very carefully looking at the development of cybersecurity. And I have a second hat. I'm also the chair of the digital committee of SmartN. SmartN is the Demand Response Association in Europe, and so we have had a lot of discussion around cybersecurity, so I'm going to comment as well from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Torben Markussen. I'm coming from a company called Kamstrup, who's producing, manufacturing smart meters within electricity, heat, cooling, and water. And smart meters for us is certainly much about communication. We are also using manufacturing infrastructure devices and head-end systems, so we are very much into radio communication. And that's also where I got sidetracked into the cybersecurity under JTC 13, working with the Radio Equipment Directive Delegated Act on cybersecurity. And I will come back to that later in my presentation.
Thank you, Torben. Willem?
Thank you. Is it also the intention to use the 5 minutes that we have, or later on?
1 minute, it will be okay.
1 minute.
Yeah, we don't want to
Okay.
overpass the 2 hours and a half.
Okay,
you.
good afternoon. My name is Willem Strabbing. I'm working for ESMIC. That's an association of smart energy solution providers. We do work on political level and on technical level. Political level with the European Commission on legislations that are important for our industry. Technical level, interoperability, cybersecurity issues. Myself, most of my time currently goes into the cybersecurity stuff. I'm working in together with Torben in Joint Technical Committee 13 of CEN-CENELEC, Working Group 8 and 9 on harmonized standards for the RED, Radio Equipment Directive, and harmonized standards for the CRA. I'm also participating in the stakeholder cybersecurity certification group together with ENISA and DG Connect on cybersecurity certification approaches. And then together with some colleagues here, I'm taking part in expert group 2 of the Smart Grid Task Force, that's now called the SEEG, by the way, on overview of legislation that is important for smart grids, and also the standards, the cybersecurity standards. Now, I have some concerns, and I know that we are not allowed to ask each other questions, but I do have some questions for DG Connect that I would like to mention, maybe now or later on, but already you're master of the scene.
Okay, thank you. No, no?
Yeah?
No, not now, not now.
Yeah, no, okay.
Hello,
Thank you.
I'm Nuno Medeiros. I'm head of Mission Critical Unit at E.Redes. E.Redes is the Portuguese DSO, the main Portuguese DSO. Mission Critical basically is responsible for developing, maintaining and operating the operational technology in the company. Besides doing that, I'm also the company CISO due to my background, and I try to be influential and collaborate as much as possible at European level. So I've been a board member for a while on the EE-ISAC, and I'm also been working on E.DSO and E.DSO entity groups and try to support as much as possible let's say, my peers to ensure that we have a collective cyber resilience. I think collaborating is one of our priorities. I believe we are going to talk a bit about it later. But anyway, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuno. Jose?
Hello. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jose Meseguer. I'm from Schneider Electric. I'm the cybersecurity subject matter expert for the region of Europe. My position is to provide cybersecurity and to implement cybersecurity in the project that Schneider delivers across the region of Europe. Here we are representing TND, the Association of Technology Suppliers. So we are in the middle of the operators, the regulators, and the different entities. So we are all aligned, and we are in a good position to work together. And thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Costas, you have already been presented, but please.
Yeah.
You have 1
Just
minute.
want to mention that I work in the supply chain on behalf of ENISA and the projects of supply chain, the team that you also mentioned for the EU coordinated risk assessment for the energy sector and telecommunications. I have been editor of ENISA, a good practice for supply chain, and we also run a project with the cooperation group concerning the supply chain ICT toolbox, but this is ongoing project.
Thank you. E.DSO?
Yes, as I mentioned, I'm a policy officer working mostly on the NIS2 directive. So the daily work involves, for example, cooperating with the NIS cooperation group from the side of the Commission, and then, of course, working on some other files like international partnerships on cybersecurity as well.
Okay, thank you, E.DSO. So you who are our 7 panelists, which means that you can start preparing your questions for the Q&A time slot, even without hearing what they are going to say. You can prepare your questions to them, because for sure they can reply in a broad sense. So, going to the panel. This morning we talked about rules, regulation, tools, focus on the cybersecurity of the supply chain. I will like to start addressing a more simple and broader question, and I would like to address which are the main challenges for cybersecurity of supply chains to keep critical infrastructures, and I would like to address this question to an end user as well as to a supplier, a world-class supplier. So I will start with Nuno, and I will ask you which are the main cybersecurity challenges for supply chains in energy operator.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So the reality today, I think it's a lot challenging for distributed system operators, actually system operators, because in the end, we are currently under a lot of pressure, as you've heard from Ferrari this morning. The energy transition is all about electrification, and dealing with that electrification is all about digitalization. So that means that you have more technology, you have more interdependency, more complexity. So the current reality is that in the past we have been dealing with, let's say, mission critical ecosystem. Operational technology was very much limited to the SCADA context, but today that's different, meaning that we are a lot more exposed. What also means is that we have additional supply chain dependencies, because if we have more technology, we have more people interacting with our ecosystem, we have more hardware and software, so supply chain increases, meaning risks related with supply chain also increase. So that's the current state of affairs. Risk related with supply chain should be there all along, but now I think it has increased a lot because of the dependency we have from others. And those others, of course, we cannot control. So we don't have even full control of ourselves and what our company does. So imagine a large number of entities that you don't know exactly dealing with your critical ecosystem every day. So that's the reality. And I think by addressing the challenges, the question, I think we have to consider at least two dimensions, people and then the technology. If you think about people, in the end, I think they are more or less an extension. There should be an extension of your own people. So the challenges are very much similar. You have, phishing and social engineering, all of the attacks related with people. You are also in some way impacted by those attacks, those threats, when they are targeting your supply chain. So of course, what you want to do is to expand your capabilities, your training programs, and ensuring the people working for this supply chain, for these vendors, are also trained good enough. And I have an example. For example, in 2020, EDP was targeted with a massive ransomware attack, and it all started in a supplier. So he wasn't aware, he couldn't protect his own computer, and then it's all story. So in the end, the attackers were able to compromise our ecosystem massively. So when you think about people, I think the attacks and the threats are more or less the same. Of course, you need to train people, you need to ensure that they understand the threats, and you need to ensure that they have the means, the capabilities to protect you and not hinder your objectives. Should I finish? Just to finish then.
Yeah, you should, but okay.
No, so I talked about people, but then of course you need to consider digital and technology. And on technology, I think the challenges are very much different and difficult. And of course, Schneider here, this is not because you are here, it's really because I understand the pressure on the vendor side, because time to market, it's everything that businesses require from vendors and suppliers. They need to be fast, delivering fast, but at the same time, we try to ensure that although it's fast, it doesn't hinder, it doesn't compromise our ecosystem. So it's a very difficult balance between ensuring that we accept the fact that we need vendors, we need their solutions, and we need them fast, business-wise. But while doing so, we need to make it as sustainable as possible. And within sustainability, we have cybersecurity. So we have to ensure, and vendors should ensure, cybersecurity as design, cybersecurity by design, cybersecurity by default. That should be something considered as a must, not only on the user side, but also on the vendor side. And we should stop really discussing cost, the cost of cybersecurity. Asking for more cybersecurity shouldn't be a cost for end users, and of course for vendors to promote a higher cybersecurity maturity level. They should of course transpose or take the value of it to the end user. So there's a compromise on both sides, vendors and end users, that I think are very important to mitigate the existing risks related with technology.
Yeah, we will come back to the topic, and I think you start answering on behalf of a manufacturer. So José, your life is more easier because Nuno introduced your concerns on the topic, but nevertheless we would like to hear from a world-class manufacturer of critical systems. What are your main challenges and concerns about?
You might disagree.
No, I agree. We are, as you said, the supply chain is extensive. We, the technology providers, we are part of your supply chains, but we have our own supply chain. The supply chain is more interconnected. Our grids become smart, become digital. It creates more bounds between different companies, between different suppliers, and it enlarges the attack surface. So we have to be aware. We need to be aware of that. But this complexity and connectivity brings a lot of difficulties. But as Juso mentioned, needs to also regulate. We are also needs to regulator. We are important entities, so we are expected to have the same level of quality, the same level of controls, and the same level of cybersecurity, or similar level of control as essential entities. So we are also under this requirement. So that's one thing we have to be aware in this. You mentioned balance between speed and cyber control and cyber security. So we cannot do it too fast if we don't do it cyber secure, because otherwise it won't work, and NIS2 will search that we don't fall on that. So for us, the best way to ensure that we are systematically ensuring the cybersecurity in our supply chain is to manage our development life cycle based on a secure development life cycle, and follow a standard which is applicable, because another subject that we have to consider is we have multiple customers to please, multiple, and not all of them in Europe are global. So we need to have a secure development life cycle, and we are advocating on this IEC 62443 4/1 secure development life cycle, which additionally to provide processes and control to make sure our solutions are developed according to a level of quality. We have also a third-party certification, which ensures also our customer, also the operators, that we are not saying that we are compliant. It's a third party, a trustable third party who said that. So that's the way how we address this challenge of supply chain.
Okay. Thank you, Jose. So moving forward, as Juso mentioned the CRA, every time I looked to documents like CRA or the Radio Equipment Directive, which are kind of horizontal regulations addressing harmonized requirements, testing and certification. The question I would like to address is, how does horizontal regulations interplay with the grid-specific needs and requirements? And I would like to address this question to Torben. I will start by Torben as a Sentinelec expert.
Yeah, now there are both RED and there are CRA. So I think the RED, the Radio Equipment Directive, has not been talked about so much today.
Yes.
But you can say that, just to build up to the CRA, I would say that the RED is coming before the CRA. It's legislation that is coming into force next year already. So and it affects all radio equipment that is internet connected. So that is somehow published under the new legislation format, where we actually only have two methods to as a manufacturer to comply with that. So it's either to go to a notified body, or it's to use harmonized standards. And the harmonized standards we have been writing on, they are not really in a state where you could say they give presumption of conformity. So that's very difficult right now. The CRA is a bit different, because smart meters, a lot of infrastructure components, they are packed on the default category. So it makes it possible to somehow use other way of assessing it to be compliant to the essential requirements of the CRA, not so strict and formal as it is in the Radio Equipment Directive.
Okay, thank you. I will address the same question to Willem. What about the smart meter European industry thinks about these horizontal regulations?
Yeah, thank you, Aurelio. Basically, already mentioned by Torben, our focus currently, it was on the RED, now it is on the CRA. And in the CRA, we have concerns about how it is defined and what is the remaining work still to be done by the Commission on an implementing act that describes the products that fall under certain categories. So as you might know, the CRA recognizes 3 categories: the default category, the important category, and the critical category. And the difference between those categories is the way you show compliance with the CRA. So every device with digital elements is in the scope of the CRA, but the way to prove compliance is different in those categories. So for example, in default category, you can use whatever standards, but it can be done as a self-assessment by the manufacturer. In important category, you have 2 classes. First class, again, you can use a harmonized standard and a self-assessment. And in class 2, you have to go to a third party to get a certificate. Critical devices have to go to a third party to get a certificate. Now, the definition of those categories and also the lists of products that are mentioned already to fall in the important and critical categories are, just name some examples: routers, modems, smart cards, smart home applications, smart meter gateway. Then we ask ourselves, okay, does that mean that every modem, every router, every smart meter gateway is now critical? And that's an issue that we are having currently because the fact that a smart meter gateway is in the critical class is based on the German example. Because they have a gateway that is third-party certified, and of course they would like to keep that process. But then from France, we get the story, yes, we also have gateways, but they are completely different, they have a different purpose, they have different functionalities, and should they also automatically be critical? Probably not. But so that means that currently there is a strong focus on product definition and category definition, while we think when comes the risk analysis to define what is exactly the risk that is attached to this product, because we are talking about the same product that is installed with different functionalities in different environments, etc. So that's a concern that we have, is to get the products right in the right categories of the CRA. By the way, we, together with smart meter stakeholders, we have created a definition of a smart meter gateway that fits the German case, but could be used in other countries or by other countries like France to say, well, our gateway or data concentrator that we are using is not fitting that category, so it should be either an important or a default class product. But then, of course, the question again is who is going to decide? Is that the European Commission, DG Connect, or is it a national authority, or are we going all to a court case to prove or to ask a judge to say, no, this device should belong to a critical or to an important category? So that discussion is still ongoing. I know that the Commission is working on the implementing act, but it is a very important stage process that we are in as manufacturers, but also the end users, to see what, or to take care that, as discussed this morning, the solution is economically feasible, technically feasible, and we have seen what it does if you require third-party official certification in Germany, what it does with the business case. So we have to be very careful in putting the products in those categories. Then finally, I think also a concern from my side is that, from our side, is that we are used to work with legislations that are quite stable. I just mentioned the Measurement Instrument Directive that is putting or writing the essential requirements for all meters, all types of meters, and that's quite a stable functionality. So metrology does not change that often. I think in the first time of 10 years period, we are now working on a revision of that directive. But now we talk about cybersecurity, that's a moving target that changes every year. Every year you have new vulnerabilities and you might have new requirements. How are we going to put that in legislation? And maybe not in legislation, but in the harmonized standards that are being created. Because now we all know that creating a harmonized standard takes a few years. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, but not in a few months. So as soon as you have new vulnerabilities, if you have new requirements, how are we going to create the dynamics in legislation and the standardization to have a quick response?
Okay.
Those
Thank
are
you.
my concerns.
Okay, I have another question, but I will skip it on behalf of time. And I will move to another point. We talked about regulation. When we talk about regulation, we talk usually about controls. We have just talked about it. But it seems from your intervention before, Nuno, that besides regulation, we have a need for collaboration. So my question is, what is the role of collaboration besides regulation that we need to have to put on place? And which collaborative partnerships should we build to assist this supply chain cybersecurity improvement?
Okay, so as I said at my initial statement, I'm all about collaboration. So I will advocate for at least 3 dimensions of collaboration. And the first one is between end users and vendors, the one that I was also talking about in the initial statement. Because in the end, we have to consider that supply chain risk, it's collective, and we can only watch what happened with CrowdStrike and the influence it has not only on customers, but also on CrowdStrike. It almost went half, the stock value almost went to half in just a few days, so it has an impact. The risk has an impact, not only for the end users, but for the companies, and companies need to protect their reputation. So that's a collective risk always. So if it's a collective risk, it should be mitigated also collectively. And my view is that both end users and vendors should really collaborate in terms of trying to ensure that probability of something like that happens is reduced, as well as the impact. I think the probability part was not that successful in the CrowdStrike incident, although the impact one, I would say it was not too bad, because in the end, they supported most of their customers fast with the existing solution. There was no silver bullet there. But meaning that that's one of the collaboration that, in my view, it's not even collaboration, it's a partnership that should be implemented by all end users, DSOs and TSOs. That's what we try to do with our critical vendors, a partnership ensuring that, of course, contractually, we are very clear on what we are demanding from vendors, but in the end, it's a virtuous relationship between both entities. Second dimension, and the second dimension is between end users, collaboration between end users, because we are all struggling to get talent. We are all very much limited in resources, and the complexity of the challenge, as I said, it's huge. So we are not all Redes and Iberdrola and ENISA and ENISA. There are really small DSOs all around Europe. So in the end, we need to consider the ecosystem as a whole. We are completely interconnected. So in the end, we should be collaborating as much as possible to exponentiate our capacity. That is very important. That's what we are trying to advocate also with the EE-ISAC, is ensuring that either you're a large or a smaller company, we are facing the same challenges. The solutions are more or less the same. Let's work together and try to be better. And last but not least, I think very important dimension of collaboration between end users, vendors, and regulation and policymakers. Because in the end, we should harmonize. We all have ideas. We can all invent a wheel and a different wheel. But that's the role of policymakers and regulators. We should have a common baseline of security also to cover supply chain risks as fast as possible. We have been talking about NIS and the network code, and that is something that is going to be addressed soon, and the CRA. But in the end, we, as I was saying at the beginning, are already very much dependent on technology. And that technology is not ours. It's from someone else. So in this relationship, the dependency should be proportional to the level of control and the level of influence we have in relation with cybersecurity, and we know that's not the reality today. So 3 dimensions of cooperation, ourselves and so end users and vendors, end users, that's what the EE-ISAC is materializing in some way, and then also with the regulators and policymakers.
Thank you, Nuno. And I would like to address the same question to Konstantinos. ENISA supports regulation, and from the very early beginning supported also collaboration, and you personally, you were a big supporter of collaboration, namely through information sharing, since the very beginning of the creation of the European Energy ISAC. So the question to you, Konstantinos, is what's the role for collaboration, and how can we reinforce and make more effective the collaboration that we are trying to put on place at the European level?
Yeah, I think, okay, as we have already said during this event, the problem is complex and we cannot solve it alone. This means that, as we saw from the exercise, that first of all we need to collaborate even within the organization among different departments. And we know very well the IT-OT gap, the people from the engineer and the people from the engineering and the people from IT. They need to identify the issues concerning supply chain. They have to find a common language, so to speak, when they are procuring products. This is one dimension. The other dimension is, as you said, the information sharing. You know, what we share concerning the supply chain, threats, attacks, and so on. ENISA has published a report for supply chain attacks. Also, I think to the right direction for sharing information is the European CVD directory that is foreseen under NIS2, where all the vulnerabilities known to the end users and the vendors in the EU should somehow be, should appear in a common European database, which will be similar to the one from the United States. So this is also an effective, let's see, it will be, remains to be proved when this directory will be implemented and how effective will be to communicate this information. And lastly, what I think, by the way, one issue with the collaboration between peers, it was a result of the cyber exercise that despite the fact that the organizations, the energy players were able to solve the issues, they didn't collaborate, especially cross-border with their peers. This is something that we should take into account. And last, as I said, an incident today is not taking place in the vacuum, a supply chain incident. It takes place either horizontally, like the CrowdStrike, or it affects many sectors. So we need also collaboration cross-sector. And here I see something that is missing at the European level. If you notice, all the events have a specific focus, a specific sector. I think we should start thinking cross-sector, starting from the two most important sectors, which are the telecommunications and the energy.
Thank you very much. Quite relevant what you have just said. So we have not finished to achieve a proper sectorial collaboration, but we are already needing for a cross-sectorial collaboration. So the challenge is good. So the call for action is on the room. So we need to collaborate more and more effectively. So. Moving forward, this morning we heard Andreas talking about the CrowdStrike. You already mentioned CrowdStrike, but I have a question to the panel. We have regulation, we have tools, we have training, we have awareness, we have lots of work done about in cybersecurity arena. So I'm puzzled how an incident like CrowdStrike can happen nowadays. A couple of months before, last year, we have a similar problem with SolarWind. It seems that we didn't learn nothing from SolarWind. Maybe collaboration was not so effective since then. And we had a huge, a massive incident and that it was not an offensive incident, it was an incident, like CrowdStrike. How can this happen, and why so many organizations were not prepared to face an incident like CrowdStrike that seems not to be so complex, like the impact we had? I would like to put this question to Laurent. Laurent, what do you think about this? It should be a kind of no-brain situation to avoid the CrowdStrike incident, but
Yeah,
that's not the case.
I'm going to, I just want to come back on the topic of collaboration, and my impression is a lot of collaboration have been created between TSOs and DSOs because the two systems are connected through electrical wires. But at SmartN, we think we've been a bit left over the aggregator and market participant side. We should not forget that the power system is horizontally connected with the market participant, with aggregator, who are operating into balancing services and who potentially have significant impact to the power system. So I think just before responding to your question, we should not forget that this sector is also an important critical sector. And of course, not if you are a startup like us, but if you are, for instance, Tesla, who is a member of SmartN, who would be hacked, let's hope not, all their supercharger in the same time in Europe, I'm pretty sure it would create a significant electrical incident. So I think my first comment is that it's not only about grids and about supply chain of grids, it's supply chain of all equipments which have impact on grid, and especially when these equipments are coordinated together, like what we do in aggregation. Now to your point, what we should realize in my view is that legacy systems are there. And if you take an example of, we do activity into car charging, for instance, if you look at OCPP, which is an old-fashioned protocol 1.6, it's not secured at all. But the thing is, the chargers are there, and it costs quite a lot of money and time to update the entire system from day one. And I think we should prepare ourselves of having some of this system being exposed a bit like CrowdStrike in the future. And it's very important that we put in place measures on the top of these risks, of these incidents, so that it does not harm the ultimate stability of the power system at a pan-European level. So we should not be naive in a way. Systems are there, they exist, they've been deployed for 10 years. Some of them are really open, not properly secured. We need in the same time to monitor that type of incidents, and in the same time make sure that the new equipments move towards standards, like what it's done now in US, like IEEE 2030-5, as an example, which is certified both from a standardization point of view, but from a certificate management and a security management point of view, up to the NERC CIP level. So I think we urgently need to move to this level, including part of the supply chain, which is through the market participant side.
Thank you, Laurent. And I would like to ask José, as a manufacturer, how do you avoid an incident like this one, as CrowdStrike, as it was the former one from SolarWind? How should you avoid that an update, a software update, will crash all your customer systems? How do you manage that?
Yes, it's a difficult question, in fact, because this incident was caused by a minor element that caused a major damage.
Mm-hmm.
We know that our systems, our supply chains are a house of cards. Every component is important. The failure of every component can cause the failure of the complete system. That was an example. So the way to address this, the way to ensure that we remain secure, is have a thorough implementation of security processes, where we are addressing, or at least trying to address, every point, every scenario. We should have in place comprehensive testing for all the patches that we release, at both sides, the one creating the patch and the one applying the patch. We should apply, or we should create incident response plans, disaster recovery plans, and most important to that, we should practice. We should systematically apply and practice and try to improve this security program in this incident response plans. So it's an endeavor that it's a cycle, it's a never-ending task. Incident like this one demonstrate that the missing any minor point can cause a major damage. So we need to be thorough, and especially when we are talking about critical infrastructure, because this is even more important to the society and to the European Union in this case.
Thank you, Jose. And I would like to go back to Nuno and ask you, how did your supply chain cybersecurity strategy play the role in this CrowdStrike issue? I think you could have also been impacted, and I think you were not.
No, actually,
What did you do?
Well, we were lucky enough not to use CrowdStrike, so in the end, we weren't subject to the, let's say, the impact of the incident. But yeah, I think the question you are asking is how can end users prepare, avoid these kind of circumstances? And I completely agree that the incident brought, it was an eye-opener. It brought the attention to supply chain. And many of us have been underestimating the impact of supply chain. So I think it's good in the end to take something good out of these incidents is the fact that we all realize the impact it has, in the economy, and it might have also to our company. So I agree with you. There's failures on both sides. Of course, there's failures on CrowdStrike. It shouldn't happen, and they already acknowledged what they did wrong, and they already identified. They have a plan. They have the processes. It's not something brilliant or very strange. It's what they should have done before. But then looking into end users and mostly looking into critical infrastructure providers. Of course, when we think about cybersecurity, we should consider not only cybersecurity in the more open concept, but cyber resilience, because our operations cannot be stopped. This kind of CrowdStrike, these kind of incidents, supply chain incidents, should affect as least as possible our operations, because in the end, that's our priority as operators of essential services. Energy supply, electricity supply cannot be stopped. So I think what we've seen also in the end user side is that they were not prepared to respond quickly enough and effectively enough to the circumstances. And that's when cyber resilience and cyber resilience principles are important for companies as ours. Ensure that while you address this incident, you try to ensure that your most important business processes, your operations, are not hindered or at least recovered as fast as possible. You need contracts with IT or OT service teams and companies. You also need a close relationship with your vendors, your critical vendors. You need to have support. You also need backups. You also need disaster recovery capabilities. There are a lot of cyber resilience conventional controls that you should have in place, not to prevent this from happening, because I think it's difficult. You can always have incremental application of patching. Of course, if it's incremental, you avoid having an impact on the whole infrastructure. So probability is also something you can work with, but in the end, the impact, I think it's where you can be more effective, having a good response and recovery capability within the company. So it's all about cyber resilience and having a close partnership with your most important vendors.
Thank you, Nuno. Costas, would you like to add something to this topic after all the European exercises and all the collaboration, awareness, training, and...
Yeah, I will not say a lot. I will comment on what Laurent said. The state of the art today is the legacy of tomorrow. Felipe put it very nicely. How do I know what the inverter of today will offer after 10 years? So I think it's inevitable to have such issues. What we can do to improve, okay, for example, for the patching. According to some stock taking exercise of ENISA 2 years ago, I think for the energy sector, if I recall, 13 or 17% of the responders to our stock taking, they didn't have a full picture of the devices that were patched or not, which is, okay, it's not a big deal because in other sectors it's even bigger, but it is a sign that we have to apply the good practices that we already know, and we have to accept some risks, the human error risk, which I don't think that is very easy to control.
Thank you, Kostas. Thank you. So now I'm tempted to go for an easy question, just to relax a little bit. And my question is, that said, how can we assess the resilience, our resilience against supply chain attacks? And namely, if we look to supply chain attacks founded or supported by at the government level, how can we assess that? And I would like to ask this to E.DSO. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. Well, maybe the first thing that I will mention is that, of course, especially at the European Union level, you can identify general principles and trends, but then, of course, it's up to the entities themselves to translate that into their daily environments and into systems that they are using and into their practical context. But I already mentioned in the opening remarks the tool that we have, which is these coordinated risk assessments of certain critical supply chains. So this is a tool that now has a legal basis and can be used in the future as well. And then these different reports. I think this report from July that I mentioned, it's actually a good example of what I just said, because it points to these common challenges, common risk scenarios, which can then provoke reflection at the level of the entities. So you can reflect, well, how would we be prepared for this kind of a scenario, for example? And then I think Kostas already stole one of my talking points because I was also going to mention the precisely ENISA's reports on good practices for supply chain security. So this is indeed an ENISA publication from last year, which again gathers these good practices from international and European standards, which can be applied in the entities. So maybe in brief, this how we can assess. I would say that yeah, at the level of governments, you can have a general overview of the situation, but it is of course up to the companies to put it in flesh.
Okay, thank you. And Laurent, would you like to elaborate a little bit also about this assessment of cybersecurity, supply chain resilience assessment?
Yeah, so again, linking back to my point on the role of flexibility service provider, aggregator, and so on, I think it's very important to relate the risk of this type of entity in view of the associated grid impact, whether it's a brownout or an incident of some sort at a pan-European level, and being able to size, I would say, the risk related to a system provided by this type of entities. These systems are complex. It's not a single chip. It's now almost dozens of chip per houses connecting through internet, which needs to be secured, aggregated into an OT control center environment. And so I think it's very important to be able to monitor the various pieces of the supply chain, and also not being naive. What we see, for instance, we heard this morning, I think I was not here, but Solar Power Europe has, for instance, produced a report about the risk related to solar inverter being supplied largely from Asia. And these are typically the weaknesses which we need to identify very clearly and take measures from this. So We were, for instance, part of the demand-side flexibility code recently discussion with DSOs and TSOs, and rightly DSOs were asking whether we can still trust these type of assets because of the distributed nature and the lack of monitoring of the associated supply chain. So yes, we need to trust because otherwise we are not going to put PV to the level of what we need, but we need to change our way of supplying these equipments, certifying these equipments, and securing the communication of these equipments. So it is really an end-to-end analysis which needs to happen into our industry.
Okay, thank you, Laurent. So as I think we are okay on time, I am tempted to go back a little bit to regulation and standards and talk a little bit again with Torben and William. I remember then when I saw the radio equipment directive, I remember to read the public comment from ESMIG, Willem. I'm going to use my own words, but what I read is that the ESMIG supported the directive, but there was lacking some feasibility analysis to make it more useful. Those are my own words. You didn't wrote that. And secondly, it seems that it was also lacking for some details for application, which means that as a citizen, a European citizen, I read the 23 or 40 comments on the directive, the feeling was that we have a directive, but the directive is on place, we need a directive, but it is not really ready. So the question is, this is something that happens often. I remember that 10 years ago when we discussed the PIA with Manuel Sanchez, that is going to close this forum, when we closed the first draft of the PIA, we also discussed that the draft was not prepared to go to public, but we need to make it public before having more feedback to tune the draft. So it is a kind of virtuous or not so virtuous interplay between the timing and the accuracy of regulation. But besides this question, I would like to ask you if there are, or what are the gaps or redundancies, if they exist, on this kind of regulations and standards, and how does this progress compares when we look to different stakeholders groups, because we are not working with the single stakeholders groups, and it seems that sometimes different stakeholders have different paces. How do you deal with this? Could you elaborate a little bit if this makes any sense for you?
Yeah, sure. I think there are different topics to be discussed based on your questions. In the first place, something already mentioned, so I will not repeat that, is in the CRA, the text of the CRA is adopted, but the work still goes on the annexes and the implementing act. And that's where we think is the most important part of classifying products, and also understand, okay, what do you need to do for this product to create a harmonized standard, and how to prove compliance with the directive, which basically with the MID is already arranged. We have this NLF scheme, so we know how that works. Only for the CRA, it still needs to be done. There is also a discussion about using protection profiles instead of a harmonized standard. So that's what Germany, of course, wants to do. They have a protection profile for the smart meter gateway, and they want to use that. And then you have I think the EUCC framework to be used, but does it lead automatically to presumption of conformity? That's still a discussion. So that's what we meant with story is not ready. So we have to continue with making it complete. Then if you look at the total legislation, I already mentioned that I'm working with some people here in Expert Group 2 of the Smart Grid Task Force. What we try to do there is to give a total overview of all the legislation related to cybersecurity for smart grid components. At least so we have an overview of everything that goes on and where are the overlaps and where are the gaps. So what are we still missing if we have the total overview? And the first thing we already identified, of course, is that there are overlaps. We mentioned the RED Delegated Act and we mentioned the CRA. There's almost 100% overlap. But luckily, the Commission recognized that and said, okay, the RED Delegated Act is going to cease to have effect as soon as the CRA is in force. So that solves that problem. But then we are in a revision of the MID already mentioned, and the MID also, the directive also has security requirements, but they come from DG Grow and not from DG Connect. So these two have to, we talk about collaboration, these two have to get together and say, okay, you are going to on one side or the other, you have to remove these requirements because otherwise it leads to double tests. You have to go to one notified body for the MID, you have to go probably to another one for the CRA, and they both are going to do the same thing. So we have to avoid that. So that's overlaps that are also, we recognize them already, so that's also something to take care of. Then finally, it's not directly your question, but I would like to say is we are going towards harmonized standards as a European solution for the requirements and the way how to test and assess the equipment. Then if I look at our product portfolio from our members, smart meter gateway, smart meters and related equipment, I think it was about 4 years ago that we started to collect security requirements for smart meters, and many of the end users told us, well, we are different from that other country because we have our own set, and we collected, I think, about 400 different requirements, and then we said, okay, let's try to find a commonality. And we were able to bring those 400 back to 30 common requirements, the maximum requirements. So I'm not so afraid about creating a standard or a technical solution to prove compliance. I'm more concerned about what I earlier said is how are we going to maintain that in an efficient process. So yeah, I don't know if it was completely an answer on your question, but I don't know, Torben, if you would like to add something to that.
Please do. Thank you.
Yes, I can do that. Yes, I think one of the problems is that it's a very diverse market. When we are talking about distribution of energy today, it's about there are some larger distributors and there are many and thousands of smaller distributors. When we entered the working group 8, working with the harmonized standards for the RED, there was almost 200 experts, very diverse from many sectors, and there were also many smart meter stakeholders. And the smart meter stakeholders, they couldn't really agree because there was some resistance. We want to protect our own architectures, and we want basically status quo on the products, because when you're talking about both the RED and the Cyber Resilience Act, it's very product focused, so it's not focused on the entire system. There are countries where you have certification schemes that you have to certify your complete system in. There are countries like Germany that have specific components that they want to put into the systems, and other countries like in many northern countries, the government via the NIS2 tells the DSO how to actually that they have to comply with. They have to find out their own rules for being secure, and then via contractual agreements with the manufacturer, we put up some diverse products for the different markets. So basically, I think manufacturers, they want standards. We want to be interoperable. We want to comply with standards, because that's the only way we can do real mass production for the market and compare against our competitors. But you must also realize that the market we are in, it's decades of implementation from the DSOs and the national countries where they have invested a lot of money into the architectures and the equipment. So we are also fighting time here, because if you want to expand your a certain area with smart meters, you have now to comply with the new rules in 1 year, or for the Cyber Resilience Act in 3 years, to be able to put your CE mark on your product, and that doesn't really fit with the speed that especially large distributors are looking into. So I think DSOs better off with the new standards that are coming? Probably not. The biggest one, probably not, because they just see an additional cost because they have already their instruments ready. But for many of the smaller distributors, they simply rely on the manufacturers that they're able to produce secure products, secure infrastructure, and so on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So a question would be, are DSOs ready for standards? So
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm tempted for a very last question before asking the audience. I think I still have 5 minutes. And my last question is, looking to what we have discussed today, are there, for sure they are, I think they are, but I would like to ask if there are any issues that should be addressed, that still need to be addressed, and should we review our priorities, or are we okay with the present regulation and the current priorities? And I would like to address this to Laurent. And also to you. But,
Yes,
Laurent.
so we think the overarching regulations are there and are solid to be applied. The problem is we miss implementing guidelines, we miss implementing act, and we heard for NIS2, but it's exactly the same for the Cybersecurity Network Code. When we read it, we have overall principle for defining, I would say, criticality of certain systems. How do we look at this from an aggregator point of view? It's far from being very, very obvious. And then going into the detail of how you do the audits, who is certifying, how do you analyze complex systems, what are the standards to be used, not only standards for the supply chain, but the communication standards. One of the big issues in our domain is we use a lot of communication and interaction between very distributed devices across the internet as a transverse data exchange, because it's cost effective. So how do we secure this infrastructure end-to-end from the consumer and his identity to a device and its digital signature up to the level of basically what an aggregator is, what is a DSO, what is a TSO, to be able to have an end-to-end chain secured and in a proper way. All these details do not exist in any regulation. So that's what we need urgently to build together, I think.
Thank you, Laurent. Yuzo?
Can I compliment before?
Yes.
Ju-
A little
just to
bit
complement-
risky, but
with the DSO perspective, because I fully agree. I think we have the same objective in the end, is to have secure products. And to give the example of Redes, in the past, I think 2017, we had to look for the support of ENCS to develop a baseline of security requirements for smart metering. And the baseline is quite simple. It's aligned and consensualized among not only DSOs but also vendors. And that's there since 2017 or 16. And today we know there are still DSOs in Europe buying smart meters with no idea about what to request in terms of security. So that's what strikes me the most, is that having a common baseline, let's say I'm aligned with the whole process, the due diligence process related with complex regulation. But there are simple things, very simple things. 10 controls for smart metering. Everyone should follow. And this is what in 2024 is not there yet. And so just to complement, because I guess that on the vendor side, that would also facilitate a lot your job. For so many technologies.
Thank you, Nuno. Yuzo.
Yes. Well, I mean, from the Commission side, the message that we often hear is not please introduce several more regulations. It's usually rather that we should focus on implementation. And I think this is also what I hear from this panel at the moment, that we have a comprehensive framework which is in place, but there's a lot of work ahead, which is precisely to ensure successful implementation of everything that has been adopted or is about to be adopted. Yeah, it is the case for NIS2, certainly. It's the case for the network code. There are several deliverables to be produced. It's going to be the case for the Cyber Resilience Act. So I would say that before starting a big overhaul of the priorities, I think now it would be the moment to implement successfully the framework that we have, ensure that there is a good coherence between the different instruments, and then see if it has increased our cybersecurity, and I hope that is the case.
Thank you, Yuzo. So I think thank you all. I think we still have time for 1 or 2 questions from the floor, and I would not like to close the panel without a question. Now we have a question from the second row. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. So I'm Øyvind Toftegård from the Norwegian Energy Regulatory Authority. Thank you for this discussion. I'm just first a couple of questions. If Kamstrup likes standardization so much, why do you use the proprietary Kamstrup Omnia suite instead of the COSM DLMS protocol? And also I wonder, Snyder, if you like patching so much, why didn't you patch the T200 remote terminal unit from in 2012 until 2021 for all your customers? I think also, so we as regulators, we issue a lot of regulations, laws, and often we don't have the competence either to follow up these laws and check that the industry is actually doing what we want. So in the end, the industry is taking their responsibility after all for the cybersecurity. And my question is, maybe we're overdoing this a little bit. Maybe we are focusing too much on the legislation. Maybe going forward, the industry would be better capable of handling security themselves. I'm thinking, for example, we are talking so much now about future problems with more flexibility resources. We need new digital systems. It's going to be so complex, and we are crying that this is going to be so difficult. But on the other hand, in some of my research that I'm doing besides work, I've been trying to simulate the effects of cyber attacks on a future smart grid, where you have battery capacities, you have distributed energy resources, and so on and so on. And we're not able to create the outage because there is always some system that will kick in and feed the electricity that is necessary to keep the voltage. And then the question is, maybe we will have some security by diversity, right? That you have a lot of different systems, and it's sort of resilience in itself, right? So that's just my thought, that maybe we are stressing too much, and this will solve itself a little bit in the future.
Thank you. Any contribution? Yes, Costas, if you please.
Indeed, supply chain security by diversity is a good idea, I think. And I read the other day it was not publicly available, stock taking exercise concerning inverters for solar panels for member states, and some member states are tending to impose thresholds above which the end user should use an alternative provider in order to avoid monodependencies, and this way ensuring better supply chain security.
Thank you. Any other contribution from Tony? Yes, Torben?
Yeah, well, there was a question why we were using legacy old protocols. I don't know. We are phasing out, of course, those. And I would just say that Comstop have been promoting and have worked very hard in standardization for decades, and always pushing for the secure communication solutions. So some of the things are phased out, and just to be sure that not to be misunderstood, we are not aiming for a single technology. So we have communication technologies. They need to be the best technology fit for the purpose, but we are constantly pushing within CEN and also in the OMS for interoperability and I think even we also have been very active in the DLSM, DLMS association. So
thank you. We are burning the time for our closing remarks. 10 seconds, Willem.
10. You start counting. No, it's just as a quick reaction on this question, are we doing too much in regulation? I just want to give this example again that about 4 or 5 years ago, we as an industry, we started to define common security requirements for Europe. And based on that, we even created a protection profile that you can use to certify smart meters if somebody wants to do that. And that was just to prevent further fragmentation in Europe, because Germany had an approach, the UK had an approach, then there were different approaches around, and France has an approach, and we said, okay, if we have one approach in Europe, that means that products can be cheaper and we have less work, and everybody can work with this European approach. Then 2 years later came the CRA. So the legislation came behind our initiative to already start with having a common set of requirements. I still hear some end users saying, well, we don't have all these requirements. But as a manufacturer, we say, then you get a more secure meter. That's one win. And on the second hand, we can sell the same product all over Europe. That's the second win. So it's a win-win combination to have just one set of requirements and provide your products according to those requirements that also comply with the CRA, by the way.
Thank you. Laurent, 5 seconds.
5 seconds, yeah. Just wanted to come back because it's on the comment. It's the first time we heard this year from E.DSO that we would only be able to provide congestion management services through flexibility if we would be cyber secured. And so that shows that cybersecurity is not, I would say, a technical item on its own, but it's really enabling a lot of functionality. And the second comment is that I fully agree the grid is becoming very distributed, and resiliency is going to be recreated bottom up in the future. That's why we believe a lot in bidirectional charging of cars, for instance, because it would save homes in case of grid failures.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm not going to ask for any other questions from the audience on behalf of the time that we already burned. Sorry, Paula. And so the main conclusion is that we already spoke this morning. The cybersecurity challenge is too complex to be played alone. So let's work together, let's cooperate, let's join forces, and let's go further than we were able to achieve until today. So thank you to the panelists. I will ask you for a big applause. Thank you all to be here, and thank you for your enthusiasm. Thank you. So please. And now I have the pleasure to invite to the stage for the closing remarks Manuel Sanchez Jimenez. It's an old friend. For many years he was the smart grids leader, team leader in Europe. He's the father of smart grids in Europe, and now is a senior advisor for cybersecurity to ACER. And we worked together for a long time, and it's great to have you here, and I'm really anxious to hear your closing remarks. Thank you, Manuel.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to make some final word. I have to see that first it's a pleasure to see many of the friends and people who have been collaborating during the last decade, I will say. Smart meter, interoperability, cybersecurity, demand response, all these things we have done in the task force for smart grid. And now one of the results is this cybersecurity. I helped together with Olaf drafting ACER to this network code. And I think we are very much attending what is the result of that. And I have to say at the beginning that the network code was very much unclear at the European level whether are necessary or not. I go 5 years ago. I remember one of the members, MIP, member of the European Parliament, which today is retired also, say, I don't want to talk about cybersecurity. It's very, say, uncomfortable for me. That was good. But also I have to say that for some of the stakeholders, 5 years ago was still very much unclear whether Europe needs a network code on cybersecurity specifically for the electricity sector. You remember we made a good argument on the three main differences of the argument why electricity needs to have a particular network code because of the specificities. One is the interconnection, already mentioned. The second, the legacy system, already mentioned. And something like what not mentioned in the whole day is the real-time operation, which really make it very critical. Therefore, this network code is not only one more, like for transport, for health, and so on, and putting all together under NIS2. I'm very happy to see from the very beginning of the morning session that this network code is going to complementing bilaterally the NIS2. I think it's very much successful that now stakeholders, not only for the electricity sector, but also from the colleagues from DG Connect say, this is not bad, it's okay. We get some gains about this point. This is, I would say, good and interesting. And I think also discussing in the corridor, in the lunch, coffee, etc., with some of you, you tell me that this network code seems to be, I mean, you are very much more motivated to implement this network code rather than the big NIS2, which there are a lot of big areas, very much, very undefined, and so here you know what to do. Happy to hear that. The point is, what are the main issues for implementation? What are the, I ask Felipe, about what are the key topics or the first topic you see for the implementation? And the answer was, we need to have a pragmatic approach. That's okay, but doesn't answer what next. I think we are at the beginning and probably is unclear that, or is too early to define what's necessary for next. First, let's implementing first step, like nomination of national authorities to take control about the governance. I think is the first thing. In parallel, I know also during the lunch you told me that there is a very good collaboration between DSO, TSO, and ENS, and you are now performing all these technical conditions which are necessary to get it and pass to ACER. ACER also is participating from the beginning. I think you have all the ingredients. Probably the question is the speed. Are you running on the right speed? Because in my view, you have all the wind in the back. You can go quicker. I don't know whether I'm wrong, but this is my impression to participate here in this session. What else? I took some notes about the implementation of session 1. Well, of course, the introduction was no more, I mean, a big coincidence by Mr. Careto and Mrs. Sigiri about the three main topics. Cooperation are necessary, electrification and digitalization are coming, and therefore the network code is necessary, and the question is the balance between the rules of harmonization and the implementation. And I like what Enedi say, Jean-François, say, we have not unlimited budget for that. I think it's a point to keep really on the blackboard. Because we are talking with very much exciting, sometimes very exciting discussion. It's necessary, we have to do this and that, but we have not unlimited budget for that, that's clear. Voluntary participation was remarked by Felipe. I think is crucial, and I think Commission could stimulate that. I don't know how, but Commission does a lot of things, and you can do also that, but clear. And about this session, I just 2 points. I like what, come back to collaboration, what Nuno and Costa say about collaboration. I like also the description on Nuno that we need three dimensions. We have to see collaboration under 3 dimensions. One, between end user and vendors. This is okay. A second, collaboration between end user among them. That's really fine. More difficult because competitiveness is there, and the limit of the collaboration are my arms. I don't care about out there. Also between the end user and regulators. Well, that's the non-finished history. You know? That's also. There was something on Costa where I really took note, that cross-sector collaboration is also necessary. It's more and more necessary. He say especially with Costas, especially on the communication and the energy sector. I think it's a good point. Coming from horizontal, trans-border energy sector network code, a specific network code for energy sector, and needs to cross-border. I think it's interesting to say that. Also, energy and communication need to collaborate more. I'm wondering about the collaboration somebody of you also mentioned. I don't know whether it was, I think it was Laurent, about the collaboration between the supply chains, suppliers, vendors. I wonder how that's possible, because competitiveness is there, and also because today, in the current situation of geopolitical and geoeconomical situation, the third-party equal level player field is like a dream. Doesn't exist very much in some of the components. Standards, an important topic, always come up on the table for the discussion. It's really unclear, probably to me, I say to me, about the effectiveness and the implementation speed of the standardization. Probably I have to know more about that. I was co-chair on this smart metering standardization and the smart grid standards, and the cycle is very long. The discussions are also tremendous. Therefore, about the cost effectiveness on that might be a point, but it looks also to me that it's in good hands. Therefore, why not? That's clear. Just to conclude, I would say just come back to the very fashion discussion about the Draghi's report during these days. Draghi is supporting and appointing more internal market, more interconnection, that means more grids, and therefore I think is, as a conclusion, that is going to expect to have high-level cybersecurity for the future. I think this is the future for this area. With the new commissioner on security, I will say that organizations like EE-ISAC or ENCS should really approach this commissioner and start and say, hey, we are working for that, and we want to present you what we are doing and why our work is important for the internal market in Europe. That's what I can say for today. I thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I'm happy, very happy to see that you are working a lot on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next question. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Manuel and to everyone here today. And just want to thank all of our, I'm just left one last thing to do today, which is to thank all of our speakers, panelists, and moderators for the excellent work today, and the really informative sessions. And I'd also like to thank the organizers, if I can say a few names. You saw some of them: Konstantinos Muitas, Aurelio Bonquet, Agnes Naik, Paola Testini, Marta Grosso, Tiffany Jordan, Elvira Sanchez, Ugne Comzaite, and Carmen Clemente. I may have missed some people, but I did want to say those names who were instrumental in doing all the organization today. So thank you very much for coming. Great to meet you. And thank you for making this a great event with your attendance. Thank you.